It's been a long time, almost too long, since Motorola last released a phone that could tackle the best models on the market. We've patiently waited for that to happen, and now it finally did. Motorola did release two new models, Edge and Edge Plus, which are not so different except for few specs, but naturally the best model usually gets the most attention, and this time it's no different. And you probably wonder right away, did the Motorola Edge Plus live up to our expectations? Can this phone stand side by side with other top-of-the-line phones introduced this year? The answer is both yes and no. But if you ask me if other premium smartphones introduced this year can stand side by Motorola Edge Plus, the answer will still be both yes and no. When you put all of the flagship models in their most important specs like design, screen, speed, chipset, battery life, basically everything that makes a flagship phone stand above the rest, we have to say that none of them this year blew our minds. So what is the strongest asset of the Motorola Edge Plus phone at the moment? Something that over 90% of people will cite as the main feature. Of course, the Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chipset with 5G support. We're in the middle of June, and with all of the unexpected and crazy things that happened this year, we only now have the first phone with an 865 processor inside that came on our test. As a small heads up, the European version of the Samsung S20 Ultra comes with their own Exynos chipset. And finally, once we got the new Snapdragon chip in our test, we honestly have to say that it is uncompromisingly fast chip that shines in every single aspect. We don't have to mention its speed, as other competitors' chipsets are also quite fast, but Snapdragon is still ahead when it comes to that. To test its energy efficiency and heating, we're putting Edge Plus side by side next to Samsung S20 Plus and Huawei P40 Pro. That means that we have a Snapdragon 865, Exynos 990, and Kirin 990. So the biggest powerhouses that arrived in our studio this year are paired up in our testing with the reference Asphalt, a graphically very intense game that really puts a toll on the system in every way and squeezes the maximum out of it. Since we already had experience with the S20 Plus phone, like the last year's S10 Plus, it heats up intensely due to the Exynos chipset, because the increased consumption results in increased thermal dissipation, and it really shows that Exynos cannot match the Snapdragon chipset in terms of heat. To put that in perspective, we measured 8 to 9 degrees Celsius temperature increase after 20 minutes of online multiplayer in Asphalt, and that shows the problem of the Exynos chipset, which besides getting really heated up, also managed to drain 20 to 25% of the battery, although a standard YouTube test says otherwise. On the other hand, Snapdragon 865 maintains the usual temperature, which is around the human body temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, and you practically do not feel that problem. So in that respect, Motorola has an absolute advantage over the processor found in Samsung devices sold in the European market, and we think that this is a problem that Samsung will have to address at some point. Performance here is not so much a problem as power consumption and heating as a side effect are. If you're wondering where Kirin 990 chipset is holding up in this comparison, it proved to be stone cold, and believe it or not, even 2 degrees less compared to the Motorola with the Snapdragon 865, which you can see in our video. To summarize this test, phones with the Snapdragon 865 chipset for surely have an advantage over the competition in every possible way, from the raw power to energy efficiency. We have to give some props to the Kirin 990 chipset, which is relatively close to its first birthday. The Snapdragon 865 chipset in the Motorola Edge Plus phone comes with 12 GB of RAM and 256 GB of storage. And if we look at the official retail prices of the phones, which are $50 to $60 apart, Motorola offers more system memory and more data storage. But I have to mention that it does not support memory cards, which again, in the situation where we have an impressive 256 GB of space, it is not a problem as with the phones that arrive from, say, 64 GB of storage. So in terms of hardware, Motorola is the best phone to enter this newsroom this year, but it is not all about the hardware though. The design is where things get interesting. It is definitely impossible to tell the universal truth, because looking at the comments we came across, some users really liked it, while others didn't like it at all. I would say the Motorola has followed Samsung's design philosophy from a couple of seasons ago, so Edge phones look clearly elongated compared to the competing models and seem to have a smaller screen. But that's not the case because the screen diagonal also includes the sides, since the Edge screen has an endless design that descends at a 90 degrees angle, and thanks to which the Edge Plus has a front surface coverage of 95.8%. Design-wise, it is reminiscent of the former Samsung S-series models, with very similar what Huawei did last fall with the Mate 30 Pro model. Motorola used such a screen to add some functionality to it, so for example, in gaming you get two new buttons on the edge of the screens which should simulate L and R keys on the gamepad. It definitely makes sense and there is a use for the Edge, therefore some people will like this option very much. This format feels good in the hand, but it still seems that the phone is begging for a silicone case that fortunately comes included in the box. Yes, the phone does come with the Gorilla Glass 5, but considering my previous experiences and mishaps, I would still rather trust the silicone case more than I trust the glass. Where Motorola lags behind the competition is the IP waterproof certificate, which this phone does not have, while with competing models you can shoot videos or take photos underwater. You can, however, get a bit of water on the Edge Plus without experiencing any issues. The Edge Plus belongs to the category of phones weighing over 200 grams, 203 to be precise. The glass on both sides, the metal frame, and the 5000 mAh battery are the main culprits for that, and the thickness is seriously closer to 1 cm, 9.6 millimeters in the thickness of the Edge Plus. This makes it slightly thicker than the P40 Pro and much thicker than the S20 Plus. On the right side of the phone, there is a small jagged power button. Above it's a volume control, while on the left side it's completely clean. At the top, there's only a 3.5mm headphone jack, and near the top of the screen, a headset speaker in combination with the standard speaker on the bottom of the phone offers a stereo sound. In addition to the speaker grill, Type-C connector, and microphone opening, there's a one slot, wait for it, only one SIM card. This really has to be my first complaint, since I really can't remember when was the last time we had a phone in our studio without a dual SIM support. I just can't believe that someone would make this decision in 2020. There is some unofficial information that this was originally a phone planned only for the Verizon network in the US and that no global announcements were planned, but still. I don't know about you, so please let us know in the comment below, but I personally do not use two SIM cards except occasionally when I travel and buy a local SIM card for the internet access. On the other hand, the regular Edge model, funny enough, has dual SIM support. The back of the phone could have had a more bold design. The color on the phone is unusual and I can say visually effective, and in the middle we see a Motorola logo which could have been made to light up like on the Zoom model. The cameras are positioned vertically in a standard layout. And we come back to the screen that Motorola calls endless, a very curved 6.7-inch OLED screen with the resolution of 1080x2340 pixels and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. At first glance it seems like it's 21:9, but then you realize that these curved edges also count, then it becomes clearer. The screen supports HDR10 Plus display and offers the famous, for this season, a must-have refresh rate of 90 Hz. As for the quality of the screen, our color meter said it's on the good side of average. The best results in terms of color accuracy is offered in natural mode, which looks less flashy than boosted or saturated modes. The brightness of the screen at its maximum is excellent, good for use in daylight, but is a more economical mode at 50% brightness. We were not satisfied, to be honest. It seems to me that in normal use, I would keep the screen brightness above 70% for comfortable use. It is a good screen, but without a doubt behind what Samsung has to offer on its best models. Back to gaming and asphalt specifically, due to the 120 Hz refresh, the S20 is the only phone we've seen so far that offers an option to use 60 Hz in gaming settings. And I have to say this is honestly look unreal in both terms of fluidity and the colors of the screen. The Edge Plus and P40 Pro offer nice gaming experience, but is not nearly as good as Samsung, which again on the other hand does heat up a lot. In the upper corner of the device is a punch hole selfie camera, and this is where we meet the second biggest flaw of the phone. The face recognition security system doesn't exist. At first I thought my eyes were deceiving me, so I looked for the option, but the face recognition on the Motorola Edge Plus isn't there, while on a more affordable Edge model again has it. And honestly, it is strange to have this feature absent, since it's something that even cheap phones have nowadays. The situation is somewhat evened out by a definitely fast under-the-screen fingerprint reader, which works incredibly fast as it was intended to work. After countless terribly slow fingerprint readers on the other, even more expensive phones, this is definitely a real refreshment, and it's interesting that the settings you can even choose the type of animation you see on the screen and around the position of the fingerprint reader. The phone comes with a 5000 mAh battery, which was left with decent 52% after our 10-hour YouTube video reproduction test, at only 50% though, which in real use could be a bit better. All in all, the phone should offer up to 2 days of battery life for an average user, but let's keep in mind that most of us have different needs and habits and that the battery life will mainly depend on the user. The Edge Plus offers 19-watt charging, which is decent, but honestly could have been a bit faster. Wireless charging is supported, and there's an option to recharge your friend's battery with your Edge Plus phone as well. And now we come to one important aspect of Motorola and its Edge phones, and of course it's their sound quality. Compared to the hardware, performance, cameras, screens, and design, sound is something that most manufacturers do not pay too much attention to. However, we know that there are some among you to whom this is a very important feature, maybe not in large numbers, but you can be pretty vocal about it. After a long time, it seems that Motorola is the first manufacturer to pay a little more attention to the sound of this model. First, there's a stereo sound that's been enhanced by Waves technology. This name may not mean much to someone outside the audio world, but it is a company whose sound processing technology you listen to on probably every music album recorded in the past 10 years, because most producers use their audio plugins. In this particular case, their Max Audio technology was used, which along with the psychoacoustic processing helps stereo speakers provide an impression that exceeds the physical dimensions of the mobile device, primarily in the form of max bass function, i.e. low frequency reproduction. Motorola Edge Plus speakers are loud and sound really good, but we didn't notice that huge of a difference in performance compared to the speakers in the Galaxy S20 Plus phone with which we directly compared them with. Edge Plus definitely has this louder speaker and the sound depends on the content. It's just different and somewhat the bass is more prominent with Motorola. Unlike the S20, the Edge Plus also has the infamous 3.5mm headphone jack, which was missing from all other flagship phones this year. It's also available on the LG V60 phone, but sadly LG phones have been missing from some markets for quite some time. Again, marketing says that the Edge Plus has as many as 3 Cirrus Logic DACs, i.e. 3 digital to analog converters, based on which we would expect more powerful output or better sound. But it is at the level of what the Galaxy S10e provides, which is the last phone with 3.5mm connectors with which we were able to compare it with. For the test, we used AKG K701 headphones, which are considered very demanding in terms of amplifiers. Both phones, the volume and sound quality were comparable, and the difference was very mild shades, if even that much. Honestly, we expected more, not because of the sound is not good, but because with all the marketing talk, it was implied that Edge Plus has more to offer in terms of sound than other flagships did. It also should be noted that the phone comes with a pair of Motorola branded earbuds that are very good, maybe among the better ones that come in a box, so you probably won't need to reach out for your wallet unless you really want one of the wireless models. And we finally come to the segment where even the biggest ones can slip and fall because the audience can be ruthless. As for the cameras, the Motorola Edge Plus is loaded with a 108 megapixel main sensor, the same one as on the Galaxy S20 Ultra model, so it's clear that it aims quite high. Of course, it's not all about the sensor itself, but also about the way it is used by software algorithms, so the result can vary even when these two models have exactly the same sensor, especially since in this case it is produced by Samsung. But we can freely say that the Motorola's implementation of this current best sensor on mobile phones is absolutely brilliant. From a flagship phone, we expect nothing but flagship photos, but in this case they may have been slightly exceeded expectations, at least when it comes to the main sensor. The extraordinary level of details in the photos, which remains high even when you enlarge them on the computer screen, is very pleasing to the eye, as well as the very good contrast and color that seems natural and yet visually exciting. So many pixels from the sensor allow the phone to provide 6016 by 4512 pixel photos via the usual quad-wire pixel grouping that looks really impressive, in line with the best we've seen from any mobile phones. The sensors as well as Motorola's processing are brilliant even at night, when you can get very bright, flashy and attractive photos with a low noise level and excellent detail level retention. Speaking of the main sensor, we will also mention the video recording, which looks spectacularly sharp in the same 6K resolution you get while taking photos. In this mode, shooting is possible at up to 30 frames per second, although with a not very good stabilization, so 6K is useful when you want to capture a relatively static scene and all of its glory. For everything else, you will most likely use the usual 4K, also in 30 frames per second, and we will admit we expected 60 frames per second, which is strange to say at least. Anyway, and those 30 frames per second stabilization is very good at correct camera movements even when walking, although slightly rotating shutter is noticeable when panning the frame left or right a bit faster. As far as night video recording goes, the Motorola Edge Plus manages that very well too, with the expected slightly higher noise level than in night photos, but still with a very good level of detail and decent stabilization, which can often be problematic at night. All in all, the result of the main sensors are fantastic, but even the ultra-wide 16 megapixel camera is not to be underestimated, because despite its slightly lower level of detail, it offers a look very similar to the main one, with perhaps a slightly more pronounced contrast that many will like. The ultra-wide camera covers an angle of 117 degrees and supports autofocus, although unlike the main camera, it does not support optical stabilization, which considering the width of the frame is not even necessary. Interestingly, this sensor is also used for macro photography, and we can say that it manages very well in that role as well. On the other hand, we were not so equally pleased with the 8 megapixel telephoto sensor, which with an 81mm focal length provides 3 times optical zoom, of course with optical stabilization. The photos it takes have noticeably lower resolution and softer than those taken by the other two, so although they are usable, they are not at the same level of quality as if they were taken on another phone. You will still get better results with a telephoto camera than by cropping images with the main sensor, but simply we would like it to be on the same high level as the other two sensors, because that will completely round out the camera system. As for the selfie camera, it offers slightly less detail than we would expect from a 25 megapixel camera, although the photos look very good, as well as the blurring in the background on portrait mode. This camera also supports full HD video recording at up to 120 frames per second. All in all, we can conclude that the main 108 megapixel sensor definitely shines on this phone, while the other camera modules, each in its own segment, do not follow on the same level. But realistically, we will be using the primary in over 90% of their use, and that is the most important thing. And now we come to the software. This phone of course comes with the vanilla edition Android 10, so those of you who prefer a pure Android experience will absolutely enjoy the Motorola Edge phone. There are no redundant or duplicate applications. Everything is more or less signed by Google, except of course the ones we installed for testing purposes. The one curiosity is the Moto App, which is in the central hub that will allow you to adjust countless options and fine-tune the system. There are special settings that allow you to take advantage of the Edge functionality and notifications around the perimeter of the phone, adjust the layout, and change the animation around the fingerprint sensor while unlocking the screen. Moto Game Time provides a number of options to keep you focused on your gameplay, like eliminating notifications when someone is calling you or hiding any message pop-ups while you're near the finish line. Of course, the Moto actions are there as well. I like how Motorola has combined all of these actions into one application simply called Moto, from which you can configure everything. As for the price, the phone is expected to go for 1,030 euros or roughly $1,250, while in comparison P40 Pro is $1,300 and the S20 Plus is $1,240. Alright, let's sum up what the Edge Plus has to offer. Motorola has made kind of a phone that's not been in its portfolio for quite a long time and that can attract even the most demanding users. Fantastic hardware, lightning fast and fluid at the same time, great main camera, great battery, especially high quality sound, original Android experience, but it comes without some of the features that we usually expect from devices of this price. The lack of dual SIM support is hard to explain, but what about the missing face unlock? I've only used dual SIM capabilities a few times in my life, but others do need it. The fingerprint sensor below the screen is my way of unlocking the phone, but what about those who are using a face unlock? Things like these are expected today even on the cheapest models, so all this is even more baffling. And at the same time, the weaker Edge model has none of these shortcomings. After reviewing this phone, we have to congratulate Motorola on their return to the world of flagship phones. The Edge Plus is certainly a model worth considering amongst its current competition. The only real flaw we could find on this phone is the lack of the IP68 rating. In all other aspects, the Edge Plus is on par with the competition. Somewhere better, yet at some aspects still lagging behind. And we hope that this is just the beginning of the good high-end phones from the Motorola, because it was definitely noticeable in the past few months that this company is trying to return to the very top in all price categories. We hope that the next Motorola flagship will be the one that will truly be the next big thing. Thank you for watching Bench House review of Motorola Edge Plus. My name is Marco and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and comment below the video and also subscribe for more tech videos. Stay tuned and I will see you next time.